Hi, this is how to make your own masks. You're going to need some supplies. Make sure you have wire cutters and wires, some cardboard, fabric, and a large needle, large-eyed needle. Any kind of fabric will do. It needs to be large enough so that it can make your masks. So you'll want to make sure, I usually cut my cardboard first, and then I can compare it to my colorful pieces of scrap. You'll need wire, and it needs to be 6 inches long, and so you can sometimes with the floral wire you can get 3 different pieces out of there. You can use pipe cleaner as well. With my muslin, I use a whole piece, and I take the sides that are finished edge and I use it for the masks filtering filter side, and then I use what's left over as my ties. So you take your fabric, and I make my little 1.5-inch clips in there, and then I just tear them, because you can get a lot of a straight. It's much more straight than if you cut it, because it goes with the weave of the fabric. So it's worth tearing enough pieces, enough strips, so that you have ties ready to go. Then you have to finish off the edges. So I take my iron and iron a 1/2 inch down a whole piece of the one muslin. I turn it over and do it the same on the other side, so that you can get a nice finished edge on both sides. At that point, then you're going to fold them in half. So there we're finishing the one edge, finish the second edge, and now we're folding it in half, and then we're going to give it a good iron so that it will hold still while we try to sew it. And it usually makes just a nice size to tie with. So there I'm sewing the pieces. You start at the beginning and end. Make sure it's just sewn well enough to keep to tack on there. So my muslin for my filters are going to be 7 1/8 and 5 1/8. I cut them so that the finished edge is on one side, so that I don't have to fold it again. So there's my finished edge. I've already got my measured piece of cardboard, so that I just compare it, line up my fabric next to the cardboard, and I can iron my edge, and it makes it real nice and straight and very flat. It fits nicely with the mask. So then you're gonna have to sew those, that edge up. So you give it just a quick run through the sewing machine. Make sure you don't have to necessarily tie both ends, but it's good to do that, because then you make sure that it's not going to come apart as you're trying to put the rest of the things together. So I take my unfinished edge and I put it to the top and the bottom of the the longest side of my mask. So and with right in the middle, so it'll have the edges. Now those edges, I'm going to actually fold over. The dark edges that you see, I'll end up folding over, and we'll sew them so that they're connected to the muslin, and that's where my casing is. That will hold the tie as I thread it through. So now I'm going to sew the top and the bottom. So I'm sewing those pieces together, and you just run a quick about a 1/2 inch in, and you can do several at a time. It works really well. And then you want to iron them so that it's nice and flat. And we're going to turn it over and give it just a little bit of an edge, so that it can the muslin won't show through on the other side. You iron it real good, and now we're going to make sure we're on the right side, the proper upside down or right side up, to put the wires in. So there's I'm right side up, because I can see my birds are right side up, and you can stick your little wire in there, tuck it in as close as you can, pin it, and then sew it up so that it's nice and tucked in. The nice thing is, if you use floral wire, if it's gets off center, you can scooch it a little bit easier than the pipe cleaner. So that's what I would use. And then you make sure your muslin folds are there, so that they can you can put a piece of extra filter in. And now we're going to iron them, iron some folds in there, so that we can make it fit our face better. So you make a small fold right at the wire side, and then you make some slightly larger folds, down the whole mask. Make sure that they're pressed really good, so that they'll stay put. And then you want to pin them in.
Right, and I think it'll work much better once you.
And we're going to give it a quick sew. Now the trick is you want to make sure both sides are even. So when you sew it down one side, when you get to the other side, you want to just make sure before you take your final few steps that they're actually even, because sometimes they can get a little bit off while you sew them because they come untucked, and that can be a real problem. So then once you finish that, you iron the edges, fold it once, fold it twice, and sew it along the edge of the muslin. So you're actually making the casing. So that's where our casing is being finished, and it connects up with the muslin, so the muslin will stay put, and it will stay folded, and it won't unravel. And then when you get done with that, you take your finished tie, you thread it through the big-eyed needle. You want to use a super big-eyed needle. You find where the nose is, and then you start from the bottom side, not where the nose is, the opposite side. Thread your tie through the casing, get it to go all the way up through that casing. And it takes some finagling because it's usually just a little tight with all that fabric going through. And then you want to come back down the other side, so you're making a little loop at the top, and that's where it's going to fit behind your head or on top of your head. But you want to get it all the way through, so it will sit nice and comfortably. Once you get that done, you want to make sure everything looks real good and that the back is all finished, looks real finished. And then you tie the ends. One end, you just make a little knot in each end so it doesn't pull through, because that's a real drag. And that's it. You've got yourself some wonderful masks.